Sports stories from the 419 in Northwest Ohio, brought to you by a voice you know. It's time to go around the area and around the Hearn.
Hey, welcome back to Around the Hearn. We've got a new podcast this week, and it's talking about podcasts. And the Varsity Locker Room Podcast with Nate Garlock and Matt Quatman. The new podcast as they venture into the medium. We'll talk to Nate. Matt wasn't able to make it, so we'll talk to one half of the Brain Trust and see exactly what he's got in store. They had their first one. It's about 20 minutes long. It's a good listen. If you get a chance to check it out, they've got conference predictions coming up in the next couple of episodes, but there's a lot going on in the area. We're getting started. We've got golf in full swing already. The Archbold girls took down at Minster, Wayne Trace, Defiance, and Versailles in one of the many matchups that are just kind of strewn right into the first couple of weeks of the season. But high school football, high school volleyball, and cross country all getting started here in just a bit, and a lot of things, hopefully, throughout the course of the fall to talk about. We know there'll probably be a lot of football success here in Northwest Ohio because that's pretty much what we do. But a lot of other things, including the Olympics. Bluffton's Trevor Bassett, well, didn't have the ending to the Olympics that he would have liked, but still a tremendous run in France. Finished fourth in his semifinal for the 400-meter hurdles. Unfortunately, did not qualify for the finals, but cannot say enough about how proud we are to have him as a Northwest Ohioan. And to get to the Olympics, first of all, is a big thing, let alone perform on that big stage. And he gave it its all, but unfortunately did not go his way. Hopefully, be able to have him on the podcast at some point. He's one of my kind of board guests of people where you try to make sure you get them on at some point, and he's definitely high up on that list. Handful of college commitments since the last time we've done this. Congratulations, Khalil Luster, who's headed to play basketball for a couple of years at Central State. And also, tomorrow afternoon, he's got a really cool giveaway. The back-to-school shoe giveaway at Fresh and Faded from 2 to 4 p.m., giving back to the community, and that's pretty much what it's all about. Northern Kentucky's getting one of my favorite players in Coldwater baseball standout, Braylon Harlemert. Seth Elker, the big tight end from Liberty Benton, says he's going to go play for the UT Rockets. And Lord Ockmoody says, give me Findlay as my home. The Columbus Grove standout inking a deal with the Oilers after what will be a successful senior campaign, I'm sure. Speaking of Findlay, Oiler football chosen to be number one by the GMAC. Joseph Carter named a D2 preseason All-American. And the biggest piece of Findlay news, the Findlay golf program for the girls continues to be terrific. The young ladies represented by Gabby Woods, who moved on to the round of 32 in her USGA tournament this week before bowing out 2-1. But a big congratulations to her nonetheless. Boys golf on the high school links at Moose Landing this week saw Ottawa Hills take the Kalida Invitational, beating Wayne Trace, Pettisville, Kalida, and Liberty Benton, among others. High school football news, Crestview and Bluffton. Well, they're playing in week number 7, but the game is being moved to Saturday, October the 5th, because of a lack of officials. Other games that got moved to Thursdays, all BVC-ish, with Lipsick and Riverdale, Ada, Arcadia, Arcadia PG, Arcadia Arlington. And it's unfortunate that that's kind of the way that it's working, with the onus of that being you have to have 6 officials, and there's just not enough guys, unfortunately. Russia Senior Braylon Cordonier, 2 under 70. That's Fort Loramie Invitational at Arrowhead and Minster. Broke Ruscia's school record because that's what he does. Corey Bremigan in 2010. Nope. He used to be 73. 70 now. But that's kind of a small preview of what's going on, a swatch, if you will, of Northwest Ohio. We've got a lot more in the next couple of weeks as every sport gets started and it gets some things going. But we're talking about the Varsity Locker Room Podcast when we come back. If you're looking for an award-winning service and parts department with a distinguished history in the community, look no further than Lee Kinsel Sales and Service at 650 West Irvin Road in Van Wert. Are you seeking a new Chevy, Buick, or GMC, or pre-owned vehicle? Then be sure to check out our website at leekinsel.com or drive over today to Van Wert and see why we guarantee the best service after the sale you can find. That's Lee Kinsel Sales and Service at 650 West Irvin Road in Van Wert, Ohio, or online at leekinsel.com. Chevrolet, together let's drive. I know that there are a lot of podcasts out there. There are even podcasts about podcasts, but if you're listening to one, that means you must be into high school sports, and there's a new one on the market. It's free, and the Varsity Locker Room Podcast has got a pair of guys, Nate Garlock and Matt Quatman. I've got one of the two that will tell you all about it, but kind of first, how did you guys get into the idea? I know you kind of push up on this on your first episode that I just listened to, but tell these people maybe how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just a glutton for punishment. You know, people come to me with an idea, and I'm like, sure, why not? I don't enjoy free time anyway. But Matt, he came. It's been a long time coming. Matt came to me last fall, and he just had this idea. He said, "Hey, been talking with a bunch of my buddies. They're all, entrenched in high school sports and love talking about it, being around it, and they're just, basically what it came down to is they were missing that Saturday morning shows that we were used to hearing, right? Like the Matt and Matt back in the day, and just those recap shows, what Vince Koza used to do." And he's like, I think that there's a vacuum here, especially if we kind of hone this in and, we just kind of focus on, a couple of certain areas. And we talked about it for a while, and I'm kind of an impatient person, and I talk about this in the episode. And I thought it was a good idea, and I've been into I guess the broadcasting or media world since I was a teenager. My first job was in radio back in high school, working at 92 Zoo and Froggy 93. And over the last 5-6 years, been doing stuff with WOSN, broadcasting games. And so I love this genre anyway. And I said, so let's do it. So we talked about it for a while, and finally I was like, look, if we're going to do it, let's do it. And we started diving into it, and kind of led us to where we are now. I think it's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, though, Mike. I got to be honest with you.
Well, and that's what's kind of funny is I don't want to give it all away, but in one of the segments that you guys do in your first episode, you say, just give us 3 weeks. We'll make it work.
Yeah, I mean, we're not tech guys. I'm not a technical person. Even trying to get this thing going off the ground, we're on social media, we're on Instagram and Facebook and X, but that's not. I don't have a big footprint on that anyway. Let alone trying to now use it to try to push this out and get word to everybody. And it's going to be ugly. I mean, at times we know that. We hope people will stick through some of those things. We recorded our conference preview show a couple of nights ago. That's going to drop next week, and it's already one of the technical issues. The outro music plays early. We talk over it. I don't know how to fix it. So hey, there you go. You get some insider stuff. You see the mistake, and hopefully you're okay with it.
Well, I've always thought what's funny is I joke with someone the other day. I was like, I think I have 8 podcasts, which start an idea, someone bails on you, it doesn't happen, it goes a different way, kind of all those things. But I laugh at times when I go through something, put something, a ton of work into something, but by the time you put it out, it's outdated. I mean, that's just kind of the weirdness of it.
Yeah, and and I think that's even that's why we're trying to be a little bit more specific with what we're doing, and I worry that even by the time our weekly shows go, if you wanted to know what was going on, you can go and figure it out. You don't have to wait for our show to drop. But, I think part of it is going to be, we hope we're going to be entertaining enough. People enjoy hearing it. And I mean, we live in a weird world now where, a lot of people aren't sitting around on Saturday morning, open up the newspaper. They consume things differently. We both got pretty strong ADHDs. You see shiny objects, we kind of get distracted, and so we're kind of bringing that into the podcast and into the show where we're trying to keep it condensed. We're not going to go too long. We'll get bored, and if we get bored, we know everybody else is going to get bored. So we want to try to hit on as much in this area as we can. Give props to the kids who are shining on Friday nights, and kind of look forward to what's coming up, and then get out. So if you want to listen and you want to get into this, you don't have to set aside hours of your day. If you're gonna be in the car going to and from work, turn it on. You're gonna be on the treadmill, turn it on. You're gonna go for a walk, just turn it on. We just wanted to make sure that it was something that people could consume quickly, and so we could kind of avoid that where it's, well, we 2 hours, an hour and a half. Well, I'm only going to be able to listen to 20 minutes at a time. By the time I get to the whole thing, it's 3 weeks later.
And that is such an odd thing because even with this podcast, the design was always to try to kind of spotlight things that maybe everybody's not paying attention to, because you have football, you have basketball, you have baseball, or whatever, the sexy sports are. And I found that too of, well, how do I get ahead of that a little bit? Because it's not exactly like it's an evergreen sort of thing. It's, hey, Colin White, tell me about how OG's basketball season is going. Well, guess what? It's over now, and he's at Ohio State. So it is that weird sort of finding your footing of how is this going to work, and maybe is that a little bit differently than how I designed, and how insane am I to just go with it?
Yeah. And, especially with the amount of work that goes into these things, and, you're almost back to doing, almost like research and like research papers, like you're back in school, and, putting that conference preview show together was like just a weekend of sitting in front of the computer and finding different things. And I mean, everybody's busy. Coaches are busy. Information's all over the place. It's not all condensed and easy. And that's why we're doing this, to try to make it that way. But obviously that puts more work on us. And, sometimes you wonder, like, all right, is this going to work? Is it going to sound good? Is people going to be interested in it? And then it's like, well, what if we get like 4 people listening? Is this all this going to be worth it in the end? And, at the end of the day, we both love sports. Me and Matt have known each other for a long time. We like to, bust each other's chops about a lot of stuff. And, I like to poke that bear with him. And, I think that stuff comes through in the podcast. And I think that maybe is what hopefully will get people listening, and will be something that maybe people latch onto, is that we're going to spotlight a lot of stuff locally. We're going to try to really hit, the games that we know, at least we think people will be the most interested in, and, try to, shine some spotlight on those games and those kids, and maybe even try to get some of the kids that maybe you don't hear about more often, and kind of get their name out there as well, and just try to be a different avenue for high school sports. I mean, like, and people listening to your podcast, I mean, high school sports is huge around here. And so, we're just hoping that we can kind of carve out our own little corner of it.
Well, it's kind of funny because I really appreciate when people go in depth and not just, hey, Grove's been good, they'll probably be pretty good this year, they got Barraza, and all that. But I know from my own insanity that I had 50 or 60 basketball coaches last year for my podcast, and I remember getting to the end of it, and it was a totally different thing. I was tired of hearing myself talk. You guys kind of are still new with that, of you maybe haven't hated yourself at the end of it enough. Do you kind of look at that and go, okay, it's greater because we're doing it in smaller doses, that we don't have to maybe be as exposed to ourselves, I guess?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely a part of it. Now, I already hate the sound of my voice because I do the editing on it. So I, listen to it 10 or 15 times trying to, if I'm trying to tweak something or figure it out until we get a little bit more proficient. So there are times where I'm like, all right, I literally just cannot hear my voice anymore. I gotta step away from this for a second. But I think that being able to have 2 people do it, being able to it not just be a one person thing, and, we get to split those duties and different perspectives on things. Matt and I, even though, we're friends and we've known each other for a long time, I mean, we know each other from back when I was in high school. He was a teacher I graduated from LCC, and he was a teacher at LCC back in the time. So we definitely have a different dynamic. He played football back in the 90s. I never even played football. I'm just a big fan of football and basketball. And so we have, we can come at it from different angles, and I think that kind of is what makes it a little unique, and we keep it short like that, so it doesn't, we don't get exhausted in doing it either. And that's kind of why we're just focusing on football. And then once football season's over, as long as, people seem to be interested in what we're doing, or at least entertained by it, well, plan is to then jump into basketball. But then that's going to be it. We're just going to focus on those 2 things. Basketball season wraps up, that's going to be the end of our season. We're going to call that season 1, and, wait until August to record anything else, to kind of make sure that fatigue doesn't set in for us and for people that, we want to consume the podcast.
Well, it's just funny. Obviously, the greatest advice I could give you is don't talk to yourself. After a while, it gets you're just like, why am I still listening to this guy? But it's crazy because the NWC is what you guys are going to focus on next, and it's a big thing with LCC. We're here, we're there, we're back, and everything that's gone along with that is just kind of its own, I guess, animal, really. But I mean, the addition of Fort Loramie this year. It's just kind of fascinating to look at the NWC as a whole, and not to step on what you're going to do for your preview, but did you just kind of look at the league and go, man, this thing has had a lot of iterations?
Oh yeah, for sure. And actually we managed to actually get, NWC, WBL, MAC, and NWCC all into our preview. And we hit it in, we got a lot into the hour that we did. And the NWC was one of the ones that, I think took a little bit longer along with the WBL, just because the makeup is so unique, especially with this new look NWC, right? Like you talked about with Fort Loramie, which kind of, I think, caught a lot of people off guard when they talked about expansion. And, then you bring LCC back in after kind of how that whole thing ended, whatever it was 15 years ago. And it's weird because until you take a look at it, I didn't even realize it, though. I've been a little critical of the NWC because, you lose Ada, you lose Lipstick, you have all these moving pieces. And I think for a while, a lot of people were like, is the NWC even going to be able to survive? Do they need to merge with somebody else to continue to be a strong conference and all these things? And then they come in with LCC and Fort Loramie, and you look at from top to bottom, every team except for one last year made the playoffs. So that might be one of the most complete conferences in this area.
Well, and growing up being a Spencerville kid, we 8-2 a lot of years and didn't make the playoffs in the old, not everybody gets to get in configuration.
Right.
But it's just fascinating. I remember, though, when Fort Loramie became an independent, I remember saying to a bunch of people, and Aaron Matthews and I used to talk about Fort Loramie all the time of, they'd be perfect, right? Because they're right there. So maybe we looked at it a little bit different, but it's, being a Spencerville kid, you look at it and you say Lincoln View still doesn't have their football team complete. It's kind of sad, but I think the WBL is fascinating this year from top to bottom, and I'm in the process of interviewing all those coaches, but because last year was highly competitive, I mean, St. Mary's starts off 0-4, they come back and get to the playoffs. Even Bath gets in with just 4 wins. I think that, too, kind of speaks to the strength of that conference.
Yeah, I mean, that's you talk about Bath. Elida got in, and that was after they only won one of their last 6 games of the season after Ryan Magoo goes down with that broken leg. And, they still make that playoff run, and you only had the bottom 3 teams, miss out. And in those bottom 3 teams, you have a Kenton team that, blows the entire conference away offensively as far as, yards gained. But, the defense just couldn't quite, really stop a lot of people. And, now you have the storyline of Shawnee. They have a new coach and Coach Wireman. He comes over from Waynesfield where, he's done is won 20 straight regular season games. And how's he going to start trying to turn over this Indians team, which I'm highly invested in? We talk about our biases on the podcast. My son's a senior wide receiver over at Shawnee. Matt has a senior all everything over at LCC. His son had over 1,200 yards of offense last year. Yeah, he's had a little bit of success, right? And so, and you talked about St. Mary's, right? 0-4, but they brought everybody back but 2 people on that offense. They got 2, one of their running backs coming back 1,400 yards last year. Another one's 1,200 yards. We talk about this on the podcast. I mean, they're loaded. Defiance brings almost everybody back. They got to make a big replacement in the backfield from Castillo, but they figured out how to win without him last year when he went down with injury. And then you have Walpock, and all they're doing is bringing back Division I prospects at multiple different positions. And, they got Caleb Moyer coming back at quarterback. The WBL is going to be a grinder. And I think the bad part about the WBL is that, those guys are going to eat each other up. So there may be people who miss the playoffs in the WBL who should get in, but it's just because they're going to beat up on each other.
Because it's not Region 1 where everybody gets in.
Right. You don't just get in by going, all you got to do is win one game and then
all you got to do is not be the worst team in the whole region. But
Exactly.
What's funny is you talk about Waynesfield, and you win all those games in a row. Obviously, your coach leaves, and everybody's kind of saying, wait a second. Oh, but you have Chris Summers. I mean, that's a hell of a building block or a quote-unquote consolation prize.
Correct. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure he's been successful. Right? I think anybody would take Coach Summers. It didn't end well in Spencerville, but before then, good Lord, everything he touched turned to gold. And I think the most unique thing with Waynesfield this year is going to see what Coach Summers is going to do with that offense. Right? That is a team that's still, even though they lost their quarterback and wide receiver, all those guys are used to playing that spread, throwing the ball around, high-powered offense, just getting things going, lighting up the scoreboard. Is he going to come in and do what's been successful for him more often than not, which is just grind the ball out, running the ball? I mean, that's how he was dominant. Or is he going to try to run a blend of it? Or, I think it's going to be fascinating to watch. I don't have any inside. Maybe you do. I haven't talked to Coach Summers. I'm assuming he's going to come in and do what's worked well for him, right? Most coaches do. And he's going to get back to running the ball because that's what he knows, and that's what he knows works. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Waynesfield and those kids kind of adjust to that quickly, going from throwing the ball over the place to a run-heavy offense.
Well, I love Chris, and one of the quotes I think is always funny that's attributed to him was a conversation after he came over from that town down 66 from Spencerville. And he said, the kids were all hyped because obviously they've won the last handful of NWC titles over there. And he kind of looked at him, and the guys of the conversation was, I won that somewhere else. You guys didn't win anything. Just because I'm here doesn't mean we're going to be given anything. And obviously we know about the success they end up having because he's not only a tremendous teacher, but it's because he's a great, genuine dude. And I think that maybe sometimes gets lost of a lot of these teams where it's, yes, show me wins, show me losses. What'd you do last year? I talked to Bat's coach a little bit ago. They're 0-10 before he gets there. They're 4-7 last year. But it's also how you're able to build these young men into young people. And I kind of think that gets lost sometimes.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I think if you're around high school sports at all, or you got kids playing, or you go out and you watch these teams, you can tell the culture of teams, right? And the teams that are successful on a regular basis, that culture is second to none. And the teams that struggle pretty consistently have a hard time building a strong culture from the top down. And I've been coaching a long time. I've coached, I coach soccer, swimming, lacrosse. I'm a long time track coach at LCC as well. The culture of your team starts with your head coach. And that I think that's more important than even maybe the knowledge that you bring is what culture are you going to build within your program? Because you can get away with not being the smartest X and O coach if you have a room full of kids that will run through a brick wall for you without ever questioning why they should do it. They just trust you and say, okay, he says this is going to work, so we'll do it. And I don't think that can be overstated. And there are coaches, you and I know that have that, and then there are coaches that I'm sure you and I both know that don't. And I don't think it's overly difficult to figure that out sometimes. And I think Chris is one of those coaches that those kids tend to just say, yeah, whatever you need, coach, and they do it. And it usually works out better for them when they do.
Talking about the Varsity Locker Room Podcast, you guys, obviously the labor of love that we talked about a little bit ago, but also getting to do games. Do you have a spot that when you look at every year, you hope your schedule says, I'm going here, whether it's this game or this venue, that you just are absolutely over the moon about?
I think anytime that I get an opportunity to go down to Walpock, that because usually my phones aren't as open on Friday nights with my son playing football. So usually I don't start getting a lot of games consistently until the tournament run. And by then it's cold, and that Walpock, that entire facility is beautiful. That press box is one of the best ones to be in. So I really enjoy going there. Um, you know, there's really we're pretty lucky around here. There's not too many that I've gone to where it's been like, why are we here? What are you doing? I think as high school sports has really grown, and this, especially since I think COVID, when everybody wanted everything broadcasted all the time. ADs have gotten better about putting you in a more favorable position, not trying to cram everybody into tiny spots. I mean, yeah, and then you got places like I love going to OG. Calling basketball games there. That's one of my favorite places to be, even though at times you may lose some of the action underneath you, and it's not the most up to date facility, right? But man, what a place to go in and what an environment. So, I think there's a lot of places that are like that, but at the end of the day, it's started to become a place after doing this for the last 6-7 years for WOSN. You just start loving going in and being able to call these games and getting to experience it a little different.
See, I always use the cop-out answer. Mine is whoever will give me a microphone and about 5 feet of space.
Yeah, the only place the only place that I think that it's been a little tight at times is over in Delphus. And I went to Delphus Jefferson my 5th grade through my 10th grade.
Sorry, I'm going to black that out. We're not allowed to use those words.
I'm very familiar with that Route 66 rivalry. So I still enjoy going over there. I got nephews and nieces that go over there, and even going over for the St. John's games and stuff. But man, that press box at times, that gets crowded, and trying to get in, squeeze in there at times can be a little difficult, but it's still fun. You still get a different, unique perspective. And, kind of like what you said, as long as I got a little bit of space and they're going to let me call it, I'm good with it. Let's go. The only time it's ever backfired, I don't enjoy being outside on those foul weather days. You mentioned Aaron Matthews earlier, and, I know you were close with him. I was close with him. I'm only back in broadcasting because of him and his encouragement and his mentorship. He meant an awful lot to me. And I can remember going down to call a game, and I forget exactly where it was, but it was a Coldwater tournament game, football game. And we're sitting on top of the press box, and it is not a fun game.
That happened to me in Olentangy. Coldwater was in the state semifinals.
Yeah, it wasn't that game, but it was a Coldwater one, and we're on top of a press box, and it is miserable outside. And I should have learned my lesson then, but I definitely learned my lesson going down to Sydney to call it was a Marion local game, and it was snowing, sleeting, 20, 25 mile an hour winds, the most miserable weather that you could ever be in. And when we got there had been some mix-ups, and so they weren't ready for us, and they didn't have a spot for us. So they told us we could be outside in one of the wings next to the press box that had no cover, had no blockage. And I showed up because we were going to be on camera, and I had dress pants and dress shirt or dress shoes on. And I mean, at one point I was with John Zerby, and at one point, after about the third time, my papers go flying everywhere. I just looked up at him. I said, "Are you over this?" Because I sure am. And then just went back to calling the action. Ever since then, though, there's always been the extra clothes that go in the car with me. I had to learn that lesson the hard way.
Well, what's funny is I feel like I was there for that game, but it could have just been a lot of the games that I've been there for, with pretty much the exact same logic. Having a color guy who is afraid of heights in some of these places really didn't help out.
I know, you're right about that.
No, and then Matthews would show up. We actually had a bet one year about who could wear shorts the longest, and I think we got through, he got through, I think all but 1 or 2 weeks, and I think I got through 10 or 11 before I was like, all right, you polar bear, you win.
Yeah, he was a psycho when it came to those shorts. I never understood. I mean, he had to be as cold as we were, but he didn't care. He didn't let you feel it. It was a great day to wear shorts. It didn't matter when it was.
See, I had a rule about it had to be more than 52 degrees. And he's like, wow, 40's fine. I'm like, you're insane. And it's funny, too, because you said about 92 Zoo and about being younger. That's actually how I got my start, because I was doing Friday Night Scoreboard show with him before 25 years of other things that I blame on him. But it's just kind of funny how everyone, I feel like, in local broadcasting sort of intersects in one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, and more often than not, it seems like it intersects with him, right? I mean, and that's even with him leaving and being gone for as long as he was when he went to go do, his stuff in Chicago. And he never really tried to keep it for himself, right? Like he was just he's like, no, if you had interest and this was something and he thought that you could do a good job and bring value, he's like, let's go. I mean, I loved calling games with him and being his color guy. And he's like, hey, you want to ride with me? Of course I do. I get to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours in a car with you talking about this stuff and learning. And he was just
And
a great
God
dude.
knows what else.
Yeah, right. Who knows what you're gonna, and you think you're gonna talk about one thing, and you know how those conversations can turn very, very quickly with him.
Oh yeah, we've been kicked out of some really nice places.
Yeah, so I never met a single person that Aaron didn't know though either. He seemed to know everybody, and everybody knew him, and you'd be sitting around going, how is it that everybody knows who you are, dude? And when you're kind of a larger than life personality.
When you're huge in Japan.
You fill the room up. Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
Right.
It's funny, though, because I've pretty much always told everybody, I said, in one way or another, everyone in, I think, at least a 6-county radius is probably connected to either he or Todd Walker in some way.
Yeah. Yep. It's that... You do what was that old Kevin Bacon game, right? Like the 6 degrees of separation. Yep. I don't think you'd even make it to 6 before you'd find some intersection with one of those guys.
What is it about just being able to cover these kids and kind of the way that Northwest Ohio is that drives you to, I mean, you look at something and go, yeah, I could do 5 or 10 minutes about that. Or kind of getting back to our prep thing we were talking about earlier, or I could spend an hour and come up with 37 things I'm probably not going to use.
I mean, I think it's just the quality that we have around here, right? Like, and I mean, admittedly, it's not like I've been all over the state or country doing this, but I mean, when you look at the quality of the programs that we have around here and the caliber of athletes that come out of here, and when you have programs like, Marion Local and, when we were doing the preview for the MAC, you have to get to the 4th team in the MAC standings from last year, and you're still talking about a state runner-up last year in Versailles. The quality of the teams is just, I think it's second to none, and it gives you so many things to talk about, and it gives you so many different avenues, and there's good personalities, and we got a lot of really good coaches you can talk about, and once you get going on this stuff, I mean, we have to put a timer. Like, we literally have a timer. We say, hey, listen, we're not going over an hour. So we got between this amount of time and this amount of time. And we did the preview show twice, because the first time we didn't put the timer on and it was over an hour and a half. And we were both like, we were spent afterwards, because I'm not a technical guy. I don't know how to stop it and pause it and pick it back up and do all those things. So we do these things in one shot. And we were done, and I started listening to it to, start maybe trying to edit it. And I was like, hey man, you can tell this isn't good. We're not into this. We're not, we got to redo this. And we literally got a timer out. We set it for the time that we put on each conference, and we just both kind of stared at it, and we're like, all right, we got to keep going. Because if not, there's so many different things you can talk about. I mean, it's a good thing, right? Like, it gives us all avenues. You got all the 9,000 things that you do in this medium, and all the other stuff that other people do. And if we didn't have all this stuff to talk about, we'd all be talking about the same thing over and over again.
I think that's the easiest and hardest thing to do, though, is set the timer, because there are some things where if you do it, I want this segment to be 8 minutes, or I want this interview to be, whatever. Sometimes if it doesn't go well, though, of figuring out when to bail out of it, of not everybody is a great interview.
You're right. I think the thing that we're going to have to figure out is when we start doing those interviews, because we want to incorporate. Right now, it's just him and I previewing, recapping, just kind of going back and forth. But we want to be able to interview. We want to be able to do what you and I are doing right now. We want to be able to bring people in, talk to athletes and coaches, but I don't know how to do that right now. We have to figure that out. And, that's going to be some trial and error. But I think the good thing is until we have that figured out and we know how to do that with what we do, we get a chance to kind of hone in our skills, and we get that internal clock, and you kind of get that timing. And, we're used to staring at something. And, if you're not a good interview, I mean, you bail out of that one, and then you just kind of fill time somehow. And the good or bad thing about me is I've never been accused of not finding an ability to talk. So, and I'm pretty good, I think, at improvising and, doing what I got to do sometimes. So, we'll see. This thing is still in its infancy. And, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, we have an idea, but this thing will morph and change. And, if we're hoping people will enjoy this, and if we get feedback and it, we need to pivot and do something else because that's what people are wanting, I mean, we feel like we can do that.
Well, it's funny because I've always told people that broadcasting, or specifically play-by-play, is like improv. So I feel like that the podcasting works perfectly because, kind of like you said, when you figure it out, if you screw up, you can always hide it and nobody knows.
Right. They're not, they don't got the script, or they don't know what's going on. And as long as you don't make it super well known, then you just keep on going. And, only at that point. Well,
there's a lot of things that only I've heard because I got done and said, I don't think that was good. Like, am I really going to put my name on that? I love what you guys have done and kind of how you're building it. And I can't wait to hear what happens in 3 weeks and beyond. Where can folks find that?
Right now, you can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're also on Amazon and Audible. I'm trying to figure out how to get onto Apple, so we're hoping we'll be on Apple Podcasts here before too long as well. And working on getting the YouTube channel going right now. But Spotify, iHeart, and Amazon and Audible right now are the best ways to find us.
I appreciate you taking some time to talk about it.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. And, and anytime we get a chance to talk about high school sports, it's a good time.
That's Nate Garlock. You can find him on the Facebook and all of the social medias. They're just too long to say.
Be more wild. Are you tired of sitting around at home this summer? Bring your family and come down to the African Safari Wildlife Park located in Port Clinton, Ohio. We have giraffe, zebra, bison, and much more. So skip the lines at the amusement park and come experience the safari for yourself. Are you tired of the normal zoo experience? Looking for an exciting way to see animals up close? Take Route 2 to the Route 53 North exit and follow the signs. Just 17 miles west of Cedar Point via Route 6. Open every day, rain or shine.
Thank you so much for staying tuned and listening to what Nate Garlock had to say about the Varsity Locker Room podcast. It'll be tremendously successful. I hope that you check that out as well. Their preview coming out on Monday of the Northwest Conference. I've got a handful of previews on my website now that it works at michaelhearn.com. Check out Nate Stidham's got a St. Mary's preview and his NWC preview coming out as well throughout the Lyman News. But I hope you've had a great summer. We're getting ready for the fall. You can hit me up on Twitter and let me know who you want to hear from or what you want to hear about. But until then, have a great night and an even better tomorrow from Around the Hearn.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Around the Hearn. Come back next week for more local stories from the NWO. But until then, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Michael Hearn PBP for more great area content.